Very good. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you again for joining us for the fourth webinar in our kind of webinar series on the State Small Business Credit Initiative. Again, my name is Pilar Thomas. I'm a partner here at the Quarles and Brady law firm in Tucson, Arizona. I'm joined by Chris James, President and CEO of the National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development. Chris joins us from Alaska, so I think it's 10 o'clock in the morning there for him, and the sun is not setting where he is. Our discussion today is going to be focused on how to administer programs and some very high-level things to consider as tribes are thinking about the types of programs that they want to do, the credit support programs, and the final kind of decision-making step is how are we going to administer it? Or should we hire someone to administer it? So we're going to walk through some of those options. And then we're also going to talk about technical assistance. As we know, there's a $500 million pot of money in the Small Business Credit Initiative for technical assistance. That technical assistance is supposed to be geared towards small businesses, but tribes are eligible to get that money directly or through the Minority Business Development Administration or through Treasury. So Chris is going to talk about technical assistance and thinking about those three options of how to get access to the money or work with either MBDA or Treasury on accessing those funds, and the types of some three examples of some technical assistance models. And then we'll end with maybe some final comments on the SSBCI comment period itself is closing tomorrow. So hopefully folks will be getting written comments in. Treasury held consultation last week, and I'll talk about maybe some of that in just a minute as well.
And Pilar, I just want to say I'm so glad for all the people that's joined us today. This is our second webinar in a series, and we're really excited to be able to provide this information. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, thank you. And we've got just information for myself and for Chris, some background information on us for those of you who are unfamiliar with Chris and I. So today we're going to talk about, again, four basic things. I'm going to give you an update on some key Treasury actions and dates. I think they, for the first time, haven't changed any dates, but you never know. I'm going to talk real quickly about a summary of the programs and program development process. And then I'm going to walk through the administration options and just some feedback that Treasury provides to folks. And I'll point you to some resources on this for some more detailed information about some of the other programs. And then technical assistance. And Chris will cover off the technical assistance components. And again, we'll answer questions as we go through. So in order to save bandwidth on my end and maybe on your end, I'm going to turn off my computer. And then we will go from there. I'm sorry, not my computer, my camera, sorry. I've been up since really early this morning. Okay, so some key dates, updates. So June 4th, tomorrow, written comments are due to Treasury on the 8 framing questions that they posed to tribes as part of tribal consultation. And I'm not sure if folks are aware, but Treasury also put out a request for interest to everybody, states, tribes, and territories. We're all eligible for these funds. There are another 5 questions posed by Treasury in the RFI. So hopefully many of you attended consultation and you heard many of the comments that came from tribal leadership and others around some of the aspects of this program as it relates to tribes. If you haven't already done so, I strongly encourage, of course, that we submit as many comments as possible to Treasury and either in answering either the 8 questions and or the 5 questions in the RFI. There's a little bit of overlap, so you don't have to start from scratch on either one of them, but I do encourage written comments to Treasury since those will be informing Treasury for purposes of them developing the new policy guidance, which they continue to say will be ready in the middle to the end of June. Treasury continues to say that the initial allocation will be available as well in the middle of June. So I know that there were some questions raised at consultation around allocation and how they're going to determine that formula. That's not in their framing questions, by the way. They don't ask us once how they should allocate the money, but I certainly would encourage you, if you're going to submit comments, to submit comments around how to allocate that $500 million. To date, there's still the date of July 30th for the notice of intent to apply. Remember, that's just raising your hand to say we're interested. If you don't file the notice of intent to apply, you will not get any money. So that's your first and really only opportunity to say we want money. The form is available on the website. We had it on our last webinar, but you can go and see what that form is. 2 pages, really simple. And then December 11th is still the date for submitting applications for the program proposals. Everybody has that date. The form hasn't been developed yet. That'll be part, hopefully, of the policy guidance. And again, we'll wait for policy guidance to come in. If you don't have to apply for the money on December 11th. As Treasury has reiterated, if you raise your hand and say we want money, but then you don't apply, no harm, no foul. You're not going to be required to apply. But if you want your money, you have to both raise your hand on July 30th and submit an application on December 11th. As a reminder, we have these 5 programs in the State Small Business Credit Initiative that were developed the first time around. One of the key questions that folks raise with Treasury is, as tribes design their own programs, how much more flexibility are we going to have? Or are we going to be stuck in these guys' programs, their old programs? Will we have more flexibility, especially where tribes want to work together in a multi-tribal environment, maybe a multi-tribal fund for equity investment, or a multi-tribal fund for loan guarantee, or a multi-CDFI fund for loan guarantees and direct loans. And so we didn't really see, at least not across states, maybe within a state, you saw multiple entities joining together, but not across states. So these are the 5 programs that states did. And one of the key questions for us is going to be, how much leeway are we going to have? I know that several of my clients, for example, are going to comment that we need to have technical assistance from Treasury on a regular and interactive basis, so that as we design programs, whether single tribe or joint tribe, we're getting feedback from Treasury around that. But with at least these 5 in mind, I'm going to focus from an administration standpoint on the loan guarantee programs and the venture capital programs. And that's primarily because we know the native CDFIs are very interested in a loan guarantee support for the lending that they do. And so this money can go and help with loan guarantee support in the lending that CDFIs are already doing. And we know that a lot of tribes are interested in using the fund, the money, to fund their own tribal corporate operations, their own enterprises. And so that would be something like the equity investment, the venture capital program, although again, built for tribes. So I'm going to focus on those 2 when I talk about administration. Just as a reminder, as an outline, we've talked about in the past the types of programs and tried to provide information around the types of programs, gone into more detail on some of those. Tribes should, start today, of course, with, what happened? Okay, start today with the type of program that you want to do. So do we have an interest in doing a loan guarantee program? Or do we have a native CDFI that we want to support? Or do we have some tribal businesses that we want to start up? Or do we have tribal members and tribal member-owned businesses? And a lot of tribes commented on that at the consultation, that they see a lot of support for tribal members, small businesses. And so that's going to be their focus. Other tribes said, hey, we've got our own businesses that we want to try and start up, maybe some subsidiaries, and we can use this. So what do you want to do? Do you have the internal capacity to develop it, or do you need to start looking at outside assistance get your notice of intent filed, begin your program design. And we talked last week about designing some programs around, well, last couple of weeks, VC programs, designing loan guarantee programs. If you want to do other programs, again, lots of Treasury resources available around how those programs work. And so I would point you to those as well. But we have to take a look at what our statutory requirements are. Do we join with other tribes? Do we create a multi-tribal program because, maybe we don't get a lot of money. Maybe we're a relatively small tribe, so we don't get a lot of money. And so maybe we join with other larger tribes, maybe in the same state. So, we've seen Treasury has put out in their fact sheet, for example, that they don't see a limitation on who we can invest in from a small business standpoint, tribal member small business standpoint. So they've said you can invest in tribal members anywhere. We know that was a question. They've said you can invest in small businesses anywhere in your state. So there might be opportunities for tribes to join together. Maybe all the Arizona tribes get together and throw some, not all, but maybe some of their money into a pool to help tribal members everywhere in the state. So now's the time to be thinking about things and talking to your fellow tribal leaders maybe in your state or in your region, or maybe talking to other like-minded tribes that have an interest in a particular area. But we got to get going with respect to design, because December 11th is not that far away. And then once we've got our design, part of that is the administration. Who's going to run this program? So that's what we're going to focus on today, and then some other steps to take. All right, so what are our administration options? And under the policy guidance and the statute, there are really three basic options or a combination thereof. First, the tribe administers it itself. And so the tribe has to ask itself, do I have the internal capacity to do this? Do I have the people? Do I have the education? Do I have the experience? Do I have the skill set? Do I have the technology? Do I have the accounting? And we'll go through what all those things are. But it requires, frankly, an honest assessment of whether a tribe has the internal capacity to run this program. And if you're a small tribe, maybe you don't. But if you get a lot of money, maybe you hire somebody. Do I establish, if I'm a larger tribe, do I want to keep it in the tribal government, in the finance office, for example? Or do I want to create or designate a tribal entity or a tribal nonprofit to run the program? And some states actually did that. They stood up capital access corporations, and the state just created this entity, and that entity administered the whole program on behalf of the state, because there's no state agency that could run it. Now, obviously, not all tribes are that complicated in design, but that may be another alternative. There is a question I know that was raised by several people on the consultation call at one of the information sessions about being able to leverage your Section 17 to run your program, or another tribal holding company, because those are considered, even if they're not considered political subdivisions, they are certainly economic subdivisions of a tribe. And so if I've already got an entity in place, can I use them? And then the third option is third-party administration. I just hire somebody to do it. I hire a nonprofit, I hire a for-profit, maybe I can hire a CDFI, or some other third-party venture capital fund manager. If I anticipate that I'm going to put my money into a venture capital fund and invest venture capital, then we will hire the venture capital fund to run it, or some combination thereof. Depends on how much money you get. You might want to run some programs out of the tribe or out of the Section 17 and send other money to a venture capital fund. If you recall in the application, there is a box, at least if it stays this way, that you check to say what kind of program you're going to run and how much money you're going to put into each of those programs. So we will likely see a combination of these administration options. If we're funding it ourselves, if we're running it ourselves, remember that we can use somewhere between 3 and 5% of the money that we get, which is for administration costs, to fund the administration costs. So it may not be a lot of money. 5% of, $1 million may be enough. 5% of 500,000, may not be enough. But one question that I think was raised at the consultation was whether we could use other money to help administer these programs. So if you haven't submitted comments yet, that might be something to ask Treasury. As we know, we're going to get lots of money from the Fiscal Relief Fund, the FRF, the $20 billion. And if you look in the interim rule, there's an item, the list of things you can spend the money on. One of the things we can actually spend our money on is assistance to small businesses, including technical assistance, business planning, and counseling. So if that's a kind of a technical assistance type activity that we include in our program, and we administer not just the credit access program, but also technical assistance, then maybe we can use some of that FRF money to administer these programs. And it might be helpful to get some clarification from Treasury that we're able to do that. Okay, let me see, if there are any, before I move into more detail on the types of administration for those two programs, let me just see if there's any questions. Have we created draft answers to the Treasury questions due tomorrow? If so, are you going to circulate? I actually have drafted answers. I did make some verbal comments, which are going to show up in written answers. I'd be happy to circulate some draft answers for folks if they're interested. Just send me an email and let me know if you're interested, and I'll send something over to you. And I also would, of course, refer you back to some of our other webinars where we pose some questions, some of which have been asked, some of which have answered, most of which have not been answered. And so we've talked in the past as well about what some of those answers might be. Okay, as a reminder, the basis of our administration decision, I think, has to be grounded in the statutory requirements of, let me back up. Sorry, went too far. Can we, one more? There we go. Okay, sorry about that thing. Sorry, technical difficulty on my end. So as we're thinking about administration, we have those three options. We have to pick an option or a combination of the options. And because we have to tell Treasury how we're going to administer this program when we apply. So it's not just program design, but we have to say we're going to hire somebody to do it, or we're going to do it ourselves. And then if we're going to do it ourselves, we have to show them in the application that we have the experience to do it, or that the people we hire have the experience. So we start with the statutory considerations. So this is out of the statute, the types of information we have to provide to Treasury around that are related to administration. So we have to be able to show the operational skills, capacity, and experience of, it says state, that's gonna equal tribe, of the tribe's management team. We have to show if we're gonna do a loan program, whether it's a participation loan or a loan guarantee, that we're gonna be able to manage the increases in a volume of small business lending. We have to be able to keep track of it. And I'll show you the types of things we have to be able to do with loan support. We have to have our own internal accounting and administration control systems. We have to be able to show Treasury and give them reasonable assurance that the funds they send us are going to be safeguarded and used properly. And then finally, there's compliance and reporting requirements the Treasury has put out, assuming that those are going to be updated as well. And again, if we're going to invest, whether it's in loans or equity, we're going to have to show risk mitigation in addition to reporting and compliance requirements. So these are just the minimum statutory requirements we have to show. And then Treasury's policy guidance and their compliance and risk management guidance. We're going to have to comply with both of those when it comes to both design and administration. So we start here. Do we have the operational skills, capacity, or experience to run the programs ourselves? If we don't, then we either got to find people and hire people who can do it if we want to do this ourselves, or we got to go hire somebody, a third party, to do it for us. Do we have the controls? So now's the time to start taking stock, so to speak, of what our internal capacity is. And if we don't have it, now's the time to start looking for folks who can help us administer these programs. So let's talk a little bit more about loan support. So we have, we're going to have, if we're going to administer loan programs, no matter the type of loan program, whether it's guarantee, participation, cash collateral, we're going to have to show lending experience, underwriting experience, and we can do credit analysis, because we're making decisions. We're going to do loan programs about guaranteeing somebody else's loan or participating in somebody else's loan. And the Treasury information, I would strongly recommend and point everybody to the SSBCI website. We've shared that link before. I'm happy to share it again. That has a breakdown of kind of operational best practices for each of the 5 programs. And one of the things they note in the loans, all the loan programs, is needing this information. We have to have experience. You have to show you have it. You have to have sound underwriting standards, right? They don't want everybody going belly up on the loan. You've got to develop a qualified lender network, and you have to be able to administer that record, that network, and monitor the performance of that lender network. And one of the things they point out is, and this might be hard for several tribes, especially rural tribes, where a lender network is not as broad as we might want it to be, is diversification of your lender network. They point that out as a best practice, that in order to ensure that you're diversifying the risk of the loans that you're guaranteeing or that you're participating in or you're providing cash collateral for, that you should have a diversified network and not put basically all of your eggs into one lender. And that's going to be hard for some tribes because maybe there's only one lender. So that might be an opportunity to think about, again, partnering in a joint multi-tribe effort where we maybe have a broader network that we can access, and especially a broader lender network. Of course, we have the national banks like Bank of America or Key Bank who would be able to do something somewhere. But if we're kind of fond of our CDFIs, then there might be an opportunity to take a look at that broader network. But diversifying that network is important because you got to monitor it. You got to make sure your risk, your credit risk especially, is not all in one place. Your eligible borrowers and permissible uses. You're not originating these loans when you're doing a loan support program. Even if you do a direct participation loan, and you say to a small business, okay, if you need $5 million and Bank of America is going to lend you $3 million, we'll lend you the other $2 million. We'll come in right behind B of A. They do 3, we do 2. You still have to make sure that, because Bank of America is the lead in that example, so you have to make sure that they're lending to eligible borrowers. You have to ensure that. They can't be lending to people that Treasury won't let you lend to, or in businesses that Treasury won't let you lend to. And this is another comment, by the way, in the policy guidance, many people pointed this out. They don't allow lending to gaming operations that have more than 33% of their revenue from gaming, or lending operations. And so I know we'll be submitting comments to remove that prohibition. That's a prohibition in the SBA rules. It has no business in this program. And if tribes want to lend money to or invest in their own gaming enterprise or another gaming enterprise, they should be able to do that. So eligible borrowers, you still have to monitor that, and is the money being used in a permissible way. You're going to have to negotiate agreements. You're going to have to negotiate loan guarantee agreements. You're going to have to negotiate loan participation agreements. You don't have to negotiate the loan agreement itself. That's for the lender to do, but you may have to negotiate the types of loan terms that you want to make. And so when you've designed the program, you now have to administer the program to ensure that the loans that you're getting comply with your program, that the loan terms are consistent with your agreements. You're going to have to put all these things, all these loans that you might guarantee or make into some type of portfolio tracking and monitor that portfolio, monitor each loan. You might have rules within your agreement around when they can call on you for the guarantee. And you might have a rule or a requirement that the lender will ensure that they try and collect as much money as possible before they come and ask you for money. So all that is part of the administration. You're basically turning into a mini bank or a mini lending operation if you're going to do loan support programs. So keeping all this in mind, do we have the internal capacity to do some or all of this? And if we don't, then who would have the internal capacity to do some or all of this? And then how do we go hire them to do it? And I know the native CDFIs have been talking a lot and having conversations a lot around them doing loan support programs, the credit support programs for tribes, maybe either through direct lending, just give us the money and we'll lend it out. And that's a model. We talked about that in the last webinar, where several states did that. Washington State, Oregon State, California just gave the money, literally grants, to their CDFIs and said, you just go do the loan programs. That's one option. Then you don't have to worry about this at all. You do some high level monitoring and compliance, but that's about it. Otherwise, you could work with a lender network or another entity, a nonprofit who maybe does the loan guarantee for you. And there's several nonprofits who might be in that business, or other lenders who might be able to help you. So there's lots of opportunities there to design administration, but the key is, as we start our program design, we figure out, okay, I got to administer it. So who's going to administer it? Am I going to do it, or is somebody else going to do it for me? Venture capital. Before I go to venture capital programs, let me see if we have any questions on the loan support programs.
Pilar, one question is there a good resource you can think of where tribes might be able to connect with a compliance contractors?
That's a good question. I would start first with, with somebody like maybe an OISTA or a native CDFI who's already got to worry about compliance issues as it relates to lending. If the tribe has a bank, you certainly might look to them and try and identify folks who already have to comply with lending rules and whether they might be a resource. I'm not sure if NAFOA would be a resource, or you guys, Chris, certainly. But I do think I would certainly start with kind of the native lending ecosystem and start to talk to some folks there. Certainly you could find, maybe some financial advisors who are working with tribes around lending programs. None come to mind off the top of my head, but certainly if there's, any questions around that, I would start probably with somebody like an OISTA, though, who is already kind of in this space and trying to figure out technical assistance, already provided to native CDFIs. Treasury native CDFI, would they be a resource, Chris? I know you were there.
Yeah. I think you're on the right track, Pilar. I think all the resources that you mentioned, I think anyone that has any type of federal funds, I know that some of your own tribal department manages federal funds, and there is some compliance elements. So it could be that you really look at what you're already doing in compliance and then enhancing that with the resources that Pilar mentioned already, especially if you have any grants or federal grants, which most of our communities have. So just matching that compliance with what's required for this program is a way to do it. And there are contractors out there, and I think what Pilar had mentioned are really good places to start. And the National Center is happy to be a resource as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's part of the administration question. And there is a compliance, there's going to be a compliance requirement on the tribe side. And I'll kind of summarize this on the next slide and I'll turn it over to Chris, talk about TA. There will be some residual compliance requirements on the part of the tribe. So thinking about, the kinds of programs and all these things I've got to worry about, it's important to start thinking about what your resources would be and who we would, as a tribe or a tribal enterprise, if the tribe delegates it to their economic development corporation, which it's, again, a lot of states did. They just turned everything over to the Economic Development Corporation and said, you go administer these programs, and the state, quote unquote, itself doesn't worry about it. But in either event, you've got to really start to identify who your resources are. And I think certainly if anybody on this call is a resource, then feel free to send me a thing and I'll send, I think Eric asked this question. But it's a good opportunity to let folks know if you're the type of resource that might be available for tribes to talk to. And then of course we got RES coming up in July, and so we'll continue this conversation. It'll be right before the July 30th, so we will have an opportunity to maybe have further conversation at RES and put people together who might be interested in being that compliance resource with the folks who need the compliance support. There you go, Chris. There's your pitch. Okay, so
thank you.
If there's no other questions on the loan support programs, and again, I know it's very high level, and I would point you to the Treasury SSBCI website. They have on their website a link to, I would point you to the link at the bottom of the website, program profiles. And they're short, 5 or 6 pages. They're not a lot of detail. They're very small print though. So it's got a lot of information. And each of the 5 programs is listed in this program profile. So for example, on the loan guarantee program, they've got a nice little matrix of kind of what kind of borrowers are eligible, what sizes, and they give you an example of what the states did. They have a nice little pictograph that shows you how the transaction, the loan guarantee or collateral support transaction, operating mechanics, and then they have kind of who's doing what, who's playing what role, and then they have a nice breakdown of the different roles that the states play, the lender plays, if you hire an entity, what role they would play. Some of this stuff is pulled from these documents, and they have this for each of the 5. So if you're interested in some of the other programs, I really encourage you to go take a look at these. Again, they're only 7 or 8, 5, 6, 7 or 8 pages. They're not very long, and they're good resources and give you some good ideas. On venture capital, this is going to be a little bit more complicated, certainly going to be a lot more expensive. Investment decisions, who makes the decision? Who sources the small business that you're going to invest in? Now, if it's a tribal business, obviously that's easy. If you're originating the investment in a tribal business, this is a little bit easier. But if you're looking to invest in non-tribal owned businesses, it becomes a little bit more complicated. Or if you're looking to invest in multiple businesses, and when we did the venture capital webinar a couple of webinars ago, we talked about the multi-tribe, multi-investor fund of funds approach. And that's one way for a lot of tribes to put in what might be a relatively little bit of money and pool their money in order to invest in small businesses. Could be tribal owned businesses, could be tribal member owned businesses. And so administering those programs would generally fall to a fund manager. Especially if you had multiple tribes participating and multiple investors as a way to pool and expand your funds. But doesn't mean you have to. You can have one tribe investing in just itself. So you're not creating a separate venture capital fund. You might be creating an internal fund, but you still have to administer it. You still have to administer it consistent with the policy guidance. So you still have to be able to track investment performance and monitor it and report on it and ensure compliance with it. So it's not going to be as simple as writing a check to the Section 17 and its subsidiary and saying we're done with our investment. You still have to design an equity investment program that is administered consistent with the law and with the guidance. If you do set up a fund of funds and you have professional fund management, you're going to see management fees, you're going to see carried interest as their compensation. So you're going to see some of that money going into compensation. This is why this is the most expensive. Equity is always the most expensive money. And then your fund structure, you're going to have to decide, do we have an LP or an LLC? Of course, we're going to have limited liability. Do we have other issues associated with that? I remember one of the questions raised was, our tribes going to have to be accredited investors? And that's a question for Treasury if you go into a big fund with other investors. So administering the venture capital programs, while you can administer them if they're relatively simple, I think are still going to be expensive and could be very complicated depending on what kind of venture capital program you get into. I've also just done a quick summary. I've pulled this from one of these best practices outlines that just tries to break down for VCP, because it's the most complicated, kind of who does what. So if a tribe runs it themselves, then what's their responsibility? Could the tribal entity run it? And what's the responsibility of a third party? And you might still have responsibility even if you have a fund manager running it. So I would point you to the kind of the complicated nature of the VCP. And if you want to do the equity investment, obviously not all these steps are going to be relevant. If you do something relatively simple, the key is going to be compliance with the policy guidance and the administration being able to monitor, track, report, comply. Even when you do a third party, you're going to have to make sure that the investments are going into the eligible businesses, that the investments are meeting your program design requirements. You might have high-level monitoring, so you don't have to put 5 people on it, but you might still need to monitor and make sure that the fund itself is performing, that the individual investment is performing. You're going to tell Treasury, we're going to create 10 jobs or 150 jobs. We're going to generate X amount of revenue out of these businesses. Well, when you turn your money over to somebody, you have to be able to make sure that they're giving you the information that you need to be able to say, yes, we're meeting these requirements or this criteria or these program goals that we had. Okay, with that, let me see if there are any final questions on kind of key administration considerations, direct administration versus third-party administration. All right, hearing none, I'll turn it over to Chris to talk about small business technical assistance.
Great, thank you, Pilar. So as Pilar mentioned, the technical assistance, the SSBCI program provides $500 million that can be used for technical assistance. And there's a couple of pieces I'm going to go back and forth talking about. There's a piece where technical assistance, the $500 million, is for certain businesses that will be applying for the program. So businesses that there's a technical for businesses that technically the tribes will support. So that's a piece of it. And they're going to be providing technical assistance for those businesses. So accessing that $500 million, you can access to help support that. As this whole program is being developed as we speak, so there are still you know, there's the Treasury is still asking questions of how that technical assistance can look, and what that technical assistance program can look like. For example, they're asking how can they work with MBDA and the MBDA centers and grantees on supporting those businesses through technical assistance, as well as you know, Treasury programs. There's a lot of technical assistance providers like the National Center. The National Center itself is a technical assistance providers. We are a MBDA grant recipient, so that is just one example, but there is a lot of programs out there, a lot of MBDA centers, and I would also say, and we've already mentioned this, the native CDFIs would also be one to provide technical assistance to the businesses that this program will serve. Some of that technical assistance can include legal, financial, or accounting services. So actually providing that to the businesses, there'll be this 500 million fund. So those technical assistant providers will be able to access this funding. Of course, it's focused on socially and economically disadvantaged businesses. So that question, what does that really mean? A socially and economically disadvantaged businesses. So that means that an economically disadvantaged individual or that are socially disadvantaged individual will be able to access the funds. Usually that includes all of our tribal community as well, and that business has to be 51% ownership of one of what they call the SEDI businesses, so that they can receive that technical assistance. Oh, I lost the slide. Give me 1 second. I'll find my slides again. I think we all are you know, have a lot of slides going on. So and then of course there's a combination of programs, credit support as well as technical assistance is part of this program. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so the next is various models of technical assistance. Good. Pilar has talked about already about self-administered technical assistance. That means that you yourself can provide that technical assistance to those businesses. That also could mean your subsidiaries or a CDFI or somebody in your community could provide that technical assistance. There's a program called the Community Navigator program, which is a SBA program. This is just now opened for resource providers to apply. A tribe can apply, a state can apply, various nonprofits can apply. That is open until July 12th. That is a specific program through SBA, and you can apply right now, today, to receive some technical assistance from SBA. So that's called the Community Navigator program. It's an SBA program, and you can find more information on the SBA website about that program. The next one is subcontracting to small business development entities or business incubators. A business incubator is a actual a support network for small business. Oftentimes a business incubator is actually a physical location. The majority of those incubators are actually a physical location, but there are incubators without walls is what they call them, where it would be just incubating the business and providing the technical assistance for that business. There's also something called an accelerator. A lot of these are technology based, and accelerators are a different type of business. All of those accelerators, incubators without walls, regular incubators, all can provide technical assistance, and they can either access hopefully some of the $500 million, or you yourself can access some of that money, the technical assistance money, and then it has the trickle down effect. Here are some, if you decide on the technical assistance with self-administrator, you can use this technical assistance. A user hire dedicated staff to provide TA, and that would mean you would actually, build your own network. Those team members would be providing what they need, including support to those businesses that receive the funding from SSBCI. You can also leverage existing programs and their material. So if you already have a network of service providers in your community, you can use your funding to leverage that as well. Or you can develop a new program or new program ideas. There is a link here that describes an SBA program, but there is a lot of availability to develop your own technical assistance program. You could partner with a community college, you could partner with a tribal college, or even partner with a university to help develop your own self-administered program to provide technical assistance to the businesses that you will be giving funding to. Next slide. Here are some community navigator models. And again, I mentioned the Community Navigator program from SBA, but here is Enlist trusted, culturally knowledgeable partners to conduct targeted outreach to specific sectors in the entrepreneurial community. So there are lots of ability to have existing resources, existing national entities to help with that program. The hub and spoke, multiple tribes, and this is where you could create a network of either tribes or service providers to provide those to provide that technical assistance. They can provide outreach, communication, and very important to have the culturally knowledgeable in that model. Do you have any, and again, the SBA does have some additional funding for creating community navigators. So I would encourage you to look at the SBA program as well, so that you may have multiple pots of money that you can apply for to help provide this technical assistance. Did you have anything on community navigator models, Pilar?
No, just that, as you pointed out, the SBA does have a grant application open now. There's a $100 million pot for community navigators. Tribes are eligible to apply for that. And so this might be another opportunity to leverage a model, a technical assistance model with the SSBCI money, because who knows how much of the 500 million we'll get. And so another opportunity may be to leverage additional federal resources to implement this, if this is a model that makes sense for a tribe or multiple tribes to go together on, again, with technical assistance, maybe going after that SBA money as well.
Yep. I think that's a great point. And I also think, there's lots of foundations that have put funding aside to support technical assistance for tribes or for small businesses. So I think looking at using the community navigator as a model and looking for other financial resources to leverage what you possibly can apply for technical assistance is really important. The National Center can help navigate some of that as well. So it's just something to think about. It's always good to leverage federal funds, and I think that's pretty important as you start thinking about, how do I support my small business network? The next slide is around business incubators. I've already sort of talked about business incubators, but one program that is being developed right now through the Department of Interior is the Native American Business Incubator Program. Tribes will be able to apply for federal funds to set up an incubator, and I hope that I know that they were in the development of the rules this spring. So I hope that program launches this summer or early fall, but that would be another opportunity for you to be able to apply for additional resources to build incubators to help support your state small business credit initiative program. And if that program opens and you have that access, but you could also establish the incubation system on your own with other resources, and even leverage that state small business credit initiative $500 million technical assistance. But the incubator model, they are usually nonprofits and have a support either very small or a specific type of business. It could be a tech business. There are incubations and accelerators around venture capital firms. They even oftentimes leverage small business, other small business investment firms as well that leverage into equity investments, but also impact investments. Impact investments is the word I was trying to say. And then, of course, you can always combine the technical assistance with SSBCI investments, which that was the one program that I couldn't get out. But did you have any more on the technical assistance, Pilar?
I would point out that Treasury, in one of the framing questions, asked about a combination of technical assistance and capital support. And so that question seemed to imply that they would be interested in hearing from tribes about doing both of these things at the same time with small businesses. So that's why a business incubator or accelerator type program might also be of interest to tribes on the TA side, because Treasury asked specifically about it. And I know I heard, for example, on some of the CDFI calls that there are lots of, well, maybe not a lot, a handful of CDFIs, native CDFIs, who actually do both, right? They both provide technical assistance to small businesses, tribal members, small businesses, and make them loans. And I know that there are, so in effect, a business incubator type idea could serve as a platform where the tribe could get funds for both the TA money from the $500 million for TA, and then leveraging that TA to support small businesses and then make the investment in them, whether it's an equity investment or whether it's a credit support, loan support investment. And so these models might be additional ways to look at how to leverage all your funds and help your tribal members.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the idea of leveraging funds is it's going to make any additional application much stronger if you have a well thought out plan and have partners with track records. And I think that's one of the also benefit if develop my own program, but also have some support from maybe a national nonprofit or a local nonprofit. You can write that in, and then that can show that leveraging of resources. I think some of those other questions that Treasury asks as well is really, how does Treasury work with MBDA to provide technical assistance? So think about those of you that already are familiar with the Minority Business Development Agency and those centers. How can there be additional partnerships there? And one of the questions they asked too, Pilar, is around what type of reporting and data to ensure compliance. So I think that's really interesting too, that Treasury is really looking for those comments around technical assistance of really what type of data should we ask? What should we be looking for? And I think for our tribes and our economic development directors out there and our tribal leaders, we all know that sometimes data is often hard to get. So if we can think about what type of data we can not only develop, what kind of systems to make sure that we have the right data so that we can show the effectiveness of this program is pretty important. And that's all I have on technical assistance, Pilar.
Great. So do we have any further questions for myself or Chris? Couple of minutes shy. Thank you, Chris, again for your time and calling in from Alaska. And hopefully you're enjoying some good weather up there. So before we go, as a reminder, we've done 4 of these webinars. Please share these. They've all been recorded. If you have any further questions, here's mine and Chris's contact information. Please feel free to email either one of us. I did get a couple of emails around draft comment. So if you'd like to see maybe just some initial draft comments that are kind of generic with respect to tribes kind of writ large. Most of the comments that I've drafted are based on conversations that I've had, these webinars, and other kind of thoughts and ideas that have been thrown out there by tribes and talking with Treasury or talking with each other. So hopefully the draft comments that I've done are kind of a representation of some consensus. Obviously not everybody's got to agree with them, but at least it gives you some sense of the type of consensus that I've heard in lots of these conversations, and maybe save you guys some time and effort with respect to trying to identify what that consensus is.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Comments are due tomorrow. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was just going to say too, as Pilar had mentioned, the Reservation Economic Summit is coming up in July. So there will be a lot of discussion around state small business credit initiatives for the tribes. Hopefully, there'll be multiple sessions, but it is a good way to network with folks and really continue to start the discussion as you think about the July 30th deadline for just your letter of interest. So Pilar, talk more about the reminder of deadlines again. I think
So
you're about to before I interrupted.
Oh, no, yeah. So we've got the comments due tomorrow. Our our letter of intent is due July 30th. So still got 2 months or so to decide whether you want to go get some free money. And then our applications will be due December 11th. And hopefully in the meantime, we'll get lots of interaction from Treasury around designing these programs, lots of support. There are lots of tribes that said we could use some technical assistance from Treasury in designing these programs. They did the same thing for the states. And so the tribes should get some of that same benefit. So hopefully we'll see something out of Treasury that can help tribes design their programs, because it could be, obviously take a lot of time and some money. And this program is not going to pay for that program design until you get the money, and you're not going to get the money till next year. So in the meantime, they could at least provide some TA on how to design these programs. Okay, let me just check one more time for questions. While I'm looking for questions, just a quick reminder. So the month of June is going to be a series of roundtables. So not the big webinars, but roundtables that are going to focus on some very discrete areas or potential opportunities for using SSBCI. So if you're interested, I'm going to list the roundtables that are coming up. If you're interested in participating in any of these roundtables, please just send me an email and let me know so we can get you the invitation and the link information, the connection information. So our first roundtable is scheduled for June 16th. These are going to all be on Wednesday, all at the same time, which is this time. June 16th, we're going to have a roundtable around how to use venture capital programs for energy projects. And especially renewable energy projects. So if you have an interest in trying to do more renewable energy projects and you want to leverage some of these funds to do renewable energy projects, our webinar is going to focus on that. And that will include participants from private equity investors who are themselves interested in investing in tribal renewable energy. So bringing together tribes, energy companies, and investors, and how to leverage these funds to do energy projects through tribal energy company investment. The second roundtable is going to focus on tribal construction. We got, I don't know, a $2 trillion, well, maybe it's $1 trillion now because Biden keeps lowering his amount, but we certainly got a lot of money from the federal government for infrastructure, housing, water, sewer, broadband. A lot of construction about to start happening, more infrastructure. So we're going to have one roundtable around tribal credit support for tribal construction companies, whether they're tribal owned or tribal member owned construction companies. There's some wrinkles that are some innovation that some states used. For example, New York did a surety bond guarantee program. And for those of you in construction, you know how important that surety bond is. And so if you have a brand new construction company that doesn't have any credit and needs a surety bond, New York actually created a program. So we're going to look at that program in this roundtable and other unique aspects of credit support for construction companies, and trying to help tribes and their members get prepared for all this construction work that's going to happen. Our third roundtable will be focused on how to do venture capital for tribal enterprises. So I mentioned how, you know, you can send the money off to a fund manager, or you can keep it and invest it in your own enterprises, but are there certain models that will make some sense? So if I have a Section 17 and I want to start a subsidiary and I've got to go get outside investment, can I do a joint venture with somebody, and how can I use this money as an example to do a joint venture with somebody else who's bringing money to the table, and now I can build up my own economic development corporation, Section 17. So that roundtable will focus on designing programs for those purposes. And then our final roundtable, which will be July 14th, so the week before RES, will be focused on credit support for tribal member-owned businesses with an emphasis on Native women-owned businesses. So I'm going to pull a little bit of gender rank here and say we're going to focus on Native women-owned businesses. And so that will be kind of what can tribes do, what kind of programs can they design to support their tribal member-owned businesses, again, with an emphasis on Native women-owned businesses. And then, as Chris said, we'll be into RES the week after that with panels and discussion around this at RES, and then that gets us to July 30th. So with that, Chris, any final comments?
I just encourage everybody, all of these roundtables will be focusing, again, you'll hear Pilar and I both say, leverage your resources. I would say also, there's a lot of information. Treasury has a great team with several members of the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis who have joined the Treasury team to help support this program. So make sure they have been doing webinar series, they've been listening, doing all sorts of stuff. So really, I commend Treasury for their great work, and please look for information from them as well.
Very
good.
You. All right, so I think, let me just see, I see one final question. Let me make sure I just get to all of our questions. How will tribes be notified of their allocation? That's a good question. No idea. I would put that in the comment letter to Treasury. And then similar question, do we know when tribes will know what their SSBCI allocations are? Again, Treasury has said they intend to do initial allocations mid-June. I assume there will be some kind of publication or announcement of that allocation. Otherwise, I'm not sure how they would notify us unless they're going to use the same contacts that they use for the FRF, although that would probably be very inappropriate. So I don't know, the states, they just put out a matrix and said, here's every state allocation. They might do the same thing for the tribes, but that would be a good question for Treasury. They have the SSBCI question email. You can also maybe send an email to them at the SSBCI or put it in the written comments to them. Again, thank you very much, folks, for listening in and participating. Hopefully this was helpful. The webinar series was helpful. Thank you, Chris, for co-sponsoring the webinar series and the roundtables coming up and continuing the discussion with tribes on how we can use this money for our small businesses and for ourselves. And with that, any other final questions or comments, please feel free to email Chris and I. Have a good rest of your week. Happy June. And we will see you in a couple of weeks at the roundtable. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye-bye.